In Devil's Hollow, 1868, widow Clara Whitlock faced a ruthless ultimatum: surrender her land or watch it burn. Jade Griggs and his men thought she was defenseless. They never expected her brother Silas, the infamous Civil War sniper known as the Reaper of Gettysburg, to return home. With his rifle aimed and vengeance in his blood, a deadly showdown was inevitable. Before we start the video, comment where you are tuning in from. The cold Wyoming wind whipped across the plains as Clara Whitlock stood before the smoldering remains of her barn. Dawn had barely broken over Devil's Hollow, and already the day carried the weight of defeat. The charred timbers crackled, still warm from the night's destruction. Clara pushed a strand of auburn hair from her face, her green eyes narrowing as she spotted something pinned to a fence post. A note, crude letters pressed hard into cheap paper. "This land don't belong to a woman." Clara crumpled the paper in her fist. 6 months a widow, and the vultures grew bolder each day. Her late husband Thomas had built this homestead with dreams of prosperity, only to die in a fall that left more questions than answers. Now she stood alone, save for little Josie, who slept innocently in the cabin. "Mama, why is the barn black?" The small voice came from behind. Clara turned to see her 6-year-old daughter, nightgown billowing in the breeze, clutching her worn rag doll. "Someone was careless with fire, darling," Clara lied, kneeling to meet Josie's eyes. "Go inside and dress. We have chores before breakfast." As Josie scampered back to the cabin, Clara surveyed her land: 20 acres of good soil, a stream that never ran dry, and proximity to the proposed railroad line. Thomas had chosen well, too well. Now that choice might cost Clara everything. The clatter of hooves pulled her attention to the dirt road leading to town. 5 riders approached, sunlight glinting off the silver spurs of the lead horse, a magnificent black stallion carrying Jedediah Griggs. The cattle baron's reputation spread through the territory like a stain. Behind him rode 4 rough men, hands never far from their holsters. "Mrs. Whitlock," Griggs called, tipping his hat with mock courtesy. "Terrible shame about your barn, tragic accident." Clara squared her shoulders. "Nothing accidental about it, Mr. Griggs." Griggs smiled, the expression never reaching his cold eyes. "The frontier's dangerous for a woman alone. Wild animals, bandits, unfortunate fires. Sensible thing would be to sell before worse comes." "My husband refused your offer 3 times before he died," Clara said, her voice steady despite the fear churning in her stomach. "My answer remains the same." Griggs leaned forward in his saddle. "Thomas had an unfortunate accident after that 3rd refusal, as I recall. The cliff path can be treacherous." The threat hung in the air between them. Clara's hands trembled, but she clenched them at her sides. "I'm offering fair market value, Mrs. Whitlock, more than fair, considering your circumstances." He pulled an envelope from his jacket. $500, enough to start fresh in a more civilized place. "This is my home," Clara said, "and you can take your money straight to hell, Mr. Griggs." The cattle baron's smile vanished. He shoved the envelope back in his pocket. "Women shouldn't use such language. Shows poor breeding." He nodded to his men. "The trained surveyors arrive next month. One way or another, this land will serve progress." As they rode away, Clara released a breath she hadn't realized she was holding. She needed supplies from town, but the trip seemed more daunting than ever. Still, the flour barrel stood nearly empty, and Josie needed medicine for her winter cough. Devil's Hollow consisted of one muddy street lined with false-fronted buildings. Once a mining settlement, it now survived on cattle, timber, and the promise of the railroad. Clara hitched her wagon outside the general store, feeling eyes track her movement. Since Thomas died, the town's welcome had cooled considerably. Inside, the storekeeper, Mr. Peterson, barely acknowledged her presence. Clara placed her list on the counter. "I need these items, please." Peterson scanned the paper. "Credits run out, Mrs. Whitlock." "I have cash," Clara replied, placing coins on the counter. "Might not be enough," Peterson muttered, though Clara knew her calculations were correct. A deep voice interrupted. "Problem here, Peterson." Clara turned to see Marshal Elias Crow filling the doorway. Tall and broad-shouldered, with dark hair and a carefully trimmed beard, the lawman commanded attention without effort. Rumors claimed he'd ridden with outlaws before taking the badge, but in the 6 months since his arrival, crime had dropped sharply in Devil's Hollow. "No problem, Marshal," Peterson replied hastily. "Just explaining our pricing to Mrs. Whitlock." "Then I'm sure you'll fill her order correctly," Crow said, his eyes never leaving the storekeeper's face. As Peterson hurried to gather her supplies, Crow turned to Clara. "Heard about your barn, Mrs. Whitlock. Griggs' men aren't known for subtlety." I can handle Jedediah Griggs, Clara said, more confidence in her voice than her heart. No doubt, Crow replied. But handling Griggs usually requires bullets, and that tends to complicate matters. He lowered his voice. He wants that land bad enough to kill for it, as you well know. He won't stop with burning barns. Clara met his gaze. What would you suggest, Marshal, that I surrender everything my husband died protecting? I suggest caution, Crow said, and perhaps accepting help when it's offered. Before Clara could respond, Peterson returned with her supplies. The interaction left her unsettled. Marshal Crow's warning seemed genuine, but Clara had learned the hard way that men's concern often came with expectations. The ride home felt longer, the wagon heavier. As Clara approached her property, she noticed something in the tree line to the north. A figure on horseback watching. When she turned to look directly, it vanished like smoke. That night, after tucking Josie into bed, Clara sat by the fire cleaning Thomas's old revolver. She'd fired it exactly 3 times in her life, all at tin cans under Thomas's patient instruction. Could she aim it at a man if necessary? The question haunted her as darkness settled over the homestead. A sound from the barn startled her. Clara grabbed the revolver and a lantern, hesitating at the door. The sensible choice was to bar the entrance and wait until morning. Instead, she stepped into the night. The surviving barn stood silent in the moonlight. Clara approached slowly, lantern held high, revolver ready. The door hung slightly ajar. She nudged it with her foot. Inside, a tall figure stood beside her sorrel mare. The horse nuzzled the stranger's hand without fear. Clara raised the revolver. "Step away from my horse," she demanded. The figure turned slowly, hands visible. "That gun still pulls to the left, Clara. Thomas never did fix the sight." The revolver wavered in Clara's grip as the lantern light revealed a gaunt face framed by unkempt hair. The features were familiar yet changed, hardened by years and horrors she could only imagine. "Sila's," she whispered, disbelief strangling her voice. Her brother nodded once. "Been a long time, little sister." Time seemed to freeze in the barn as Clara stared at the brother she'd believed dead for years. Silas Boone stood before her, a ghost made flesh. The boy who taught her to ride and hunt had vanished beneath a weathered face and eyes that had seen too much death. "They told me you fell at Gettysburg," Clara whispered, lowering the revolver slowly. "Many did," Silas replied, his voice rough from disuse. "I merely disappeared." He ran a hand along the mare's neck. "Thomas wrote me about your marriage, never mentioned this fine piece of land, though." Clara's shock gave way to anger, sudden and fierce. 8 years, Silas, 8 years without a word. I mourned you. Put flowers on an empty grave every spring. Would you have preferred I came home the man I became? Silas asked, stepping into better light. A long scar ran from his temple to jaw, and his left hand bore 2 missing fingers, but the physical changes paled against the coldness in his eyes. "The things I did in that war, Clara, the men I killed. You fought for the Union, for freedom." "I killed for whoever pointed me at a target," Silas corrected. "The Reaper of Gettysburg, they called me." 38 confirmed kills in one battle. Men talk about it like it's something to be proud of. Clara studied her brother, this stranger wearing Silas's face. "Why now? Why come back at all?" Got word about Thomas. "Accident on a cliff path," they said. Silas's eyes hardened. "Accidents like that tend to happen around valuable land and greedy men." Clara's breath caught. "You know about Griggs. I know men like him, seen them in every territory." Silas moved toward the barn door, peering out at the darkness. "War taught me one useful thing, Clara, how to read danger before it strikes." In the cabin, they spoke in hushed tones while Josie slept. Clara prepared coffee, watching Silas examine the small home with a soldier's eye, noting exits, angles, vulnerabilities. "She has Thomas's eyes," Silas observed, glancing at the sleeping child. "And his stubbornness," Clara added. "She's never known peace, Silas. Thomas was always fighting for this land, and now I fight alone." "Not alone anymore," Silas said, accepting the coffee mug with his maimed hand. Clara sat across from him. "What happened to your hand?" "Confederate sharpshooter in the wilderness. Good enough to graze me, not good enough to kill me." Silas sipped the coffee. "I returned the favor from 800 yards the next day." The casual mention of killing sent a chill through Clara. "You can't stay in the open. Griggs has men watching the property." "Let them watch," Silas replied. "Men who rely on terror aren't prepared for someone who doesn't fear them." Morning brought a tense pattern that would repeat in the days ahead. Silas vanished before dawn, only to reappear at unexpected moments. He spent hours in the hills surrounding the property, watching Griggs's men, learning their patterns. Each night he shared his observations with Clara, 7 men total. 2 ex-Confederate cavalry, mean but undisciplined, 3 local toughs in it for money. 1 professional gun keeps to himself, and Griggs who never dirties his own hands. The marshal warned me Griggs plays dirty, Clara said as they sat by the fire 3 nights after Silas's return. Silas stiffened. Marshal, Elias Crow, took the badge 6 months back. Some say he rode with outlaws before that. Men don't change their nature by pinning on tin stars, Silas muttered. The following day, Clara went to town for mail, hoping for word from the territorial governor about her land claim. Instead, she found Marshal Crow waiting by her wagon. Mrs. Whitlock, he greeted her, his usual stoicism softened by something that might have been concern. Noticed you've had a visitor recently, Clara's heart raced. My affairs are my own, Marshal. Ordinarily, yes, but when your visitor might be Silas Boone, it becomes my concern. Crow stepped closer, lowering his voice. That man has a reputation that followed him from Virginia to Tennessee to Missouri. You're mistaken, Clara lied. Brother died at Gettysburg. Many thought so, Crow agreed. Until reports surfaced of a Union sniper with his description hunting deserters and bushwhackers after the war. Man called the Reaper doesn't rest easy in a grave. Clara gathered her reins. I need to return home, Marshal. Clara, Crow said, using her given name for the first time. Whatever you think of me, I want no bloodshed in my town. Griggs is dangerous, but so is your brother. War changes men, her anger flared. And how would you know that, Marshal? Which side did you ride with during the great conflict, or were you too busy robbing stagecoaches to notice a war? Regret flashed across Crow's face. We all have pasts we're running from, just be careful whose help you accept. He stepped back from the wagon. The freight office had a package for Thomas. I've been holding it, waiting for you to come to town. He handed her a small wooden crate. Their fingers brushed during the exchange, and Clara was surprised by the jolt it sent through her. She pulled away quickly. Thank you, Marshal. That night, Silas inspected the package. Inside lay parts for a Spencer rifle, the same model he'd used during the war. Thomas ordered this before he died, Silas murmured. Man was preparing for trouble. He knew Griggs wouldn't take no for an answer, Clara said, remembering her husband's growing anxiety in those final weeks. Silas assembled the weapon with practiced ease. Tomorrow, I scout their camp, need to know what we're facing. We should go to the law, Clara argued. Marshal Crow might help. Law helps men like Griggs, Silas said bitterly. Always has. Before dawn, Silas departed with the Spencer. Clara spent the day teaching Josie her letters, trying to maintain normalcy despite the fear gnawing at her. When running deer, a Shoshone woman who sometimes traded herbs for Clara's baked goods, arrived with a warning that Griggs's men were cutting fence lines to the north, Clara's unease deepened. Silas returned after nightfall, his expression grim. They're planning something, heard them talking about making an example. Griggs has promised your land to the man who solves the problem. That same night, someone assaulted running deer on her way home, warning her to stay away from the Whitlock place. The message was clear. Clara stood alone. This can't continue, Clara whispered, fury replacing fear. Thomas believed in the law and doing things right, but he's dead because of it. Law didn't protect him, Silas agreed, checking the Spencer's action. Won't protect you either. Then what will? Clara demanded. Silas met her gaze, his eyes reflecting the firelight. Me and this. He nodded toward the rifle. I've set up observation points around the property. Tomorrow I start laying traps. And then? Clara asked. Then we wait for them to make their move, Silas replied. And God help them when they do. Over the next 3 days, Silas transformed the homestead into a defensive position. He dug shallow trenches at strategic points, set trip wires among the trees, and prepared hidden firing positions with clear lines of sight to all approaches. Clara watched her gentle farmland become a battlefield, memories of Thomas's peaceful dreams for their future fading with each preparation for violence. On the 4th morning, Marshal Elias Crow rode up alone, dismounting well away from the cabin with his hands visible. Clara met him on the porch, shotgun across her lap. Quite the welcome, Crow remarked, eyeing the weapon. These are unwelcoming times, Marshal, Clara replied. Crow nodded, hands resting on his belt, carefully away from his pistol. I arrested one of Griggs's men yesterday, caught him trying to poison the well at the Peterson farm. The Petersons refused to sell too, Clara noted. Indeed, man was talkative once he sobered up, mentioned plans for other holdouts, including this property. Crow scanned the tree line where Clara knew Silas watched. Said they were planning to make an example of the widow who wouldn't take a hint. Fear fluttered in Clara's chest, but she kept her voice steady. Why tell me this? Why not simply arrest Griggs? A man's words against a town pillar, without proof it's worthless. Crow took a step closer. I've sent a telegram to the territorial governor about Griggs, asked for an investigation into land claims here. Hope sparked briefly in Clara's heart. When will you hear back? Could be days, weeks even. His expression darkened. But something's happening sooner. Griggs's men are gathering in town, drinking heavily, buying ammunition. You're warning me of an attack, Clara said, understanding dawning. Crow nodded. I've sworn to uphold the law, Mrs. Whitlock, but one marshal against Griggs's crew are poor odds, and I've noticed things around your property, preparations. Your brother isn't as invisible as he thinks. Clara remained silent, neither confirming nor denying Silas's presence. Tell him to be careful, Crow continued. These aren't disciplined soldiers he's facing, but desperate men with no compunction about killing women or children. After the marshal rode away, Silas emerged from his hiding place. Man rides like military, sits a horse too well for an outlaw. He warned us Griggs is planning something, Clara said. Silas frowned, or setting us up to expect an attack from one direction while they come from another. Not every man is deceitful, Silas. Every man is capable of it, her brother countered. War taught me that. 2 days passed with terrible anticipation. Clara continued teaching Josie, trying to shield her daughter from the tension while preparing her for quick action if necessary. She practiced with Thomas's revolver until her arm ached, determined not to be helpless when trouble came. The attack, when it finally began, started not at the homestead but in town. A messenger arrived at dusk, a young boy from the livery stable. Marshal Crow's been arrested, the boy reported breathlessly. Mr. Griggs says he caught him stealing from the land office. They got him locked in his own jail. Clara felt sick. Who sent you to tell me this? Deputy Miller said to warn you that with the marshal locked up, there's nobody to stop Griggs's men tonight. After the boy left, Clara found Silas checking his ammunition. You heard every word, Silas confirmed. They'll come after dark, thinking to catch us sleeping. He handed Clara the revolver. Keep this close. If they breach the cabin, take Josie to the root cellar and bar the door. Night fell with agonizing slowness. Clara put Josie to bed fully dressed, telling her they might need to play a hiding game later. The little girl, sensing her mother's fear, clung tightly before finally drifting to sleep. Midnight passed, then 1 o'clock. The silence stretched Clara's nerves to breaking. Then came the soft whistle from the rear window, Silas's signal. Riders approaching from the east. Clara peered through the curtain. 6 men on horseback moved slowly across her field, carrying torches. Leading them was Jedediah Griggs himself, his silver-trimmed jacket gleaming in the moonlight. The crack of a rifle split the night. One rider tumbled from his saddle, clutching his shoulder. The others scattered for cover as Silas fired twice more from his hidden position. Fire the house, Griggs shouted, and 2 men rushed forward with blazing torches. The trip-wire Silas had set caught the first man at the knees. He fell hard, his torch igniting the dry grass. The second made it 10 steps further before Silas's bullet found him. Clara huddled beside Josie in the cabin, revolver ready, listening to gunfire and men's shouts. Then came a sound that froze her blood, splintering wood as someone broke through the rear door. She snatched Josie up and ran for the root cellar, but a burly figure blocked her path. Were you running to Mrs. Whitlock? Griggs's hired gun leered at her. Boss wants this land clear by morning. Clara fired without hesitation. The bullet caught him in the shoulder, spinning him against the wall. He lunged at her with a knife, fury contorting his features. Clara fired again, and this time he fell still. Josie screamed, burying her face in her mother's shoulder. Clara stumbled toward the root cellar, only to find flames blocking their path. The cabin was burning. Mama, I'm scared, Josie sobbed. We'll be all right, darling, Clara promised, though she had no right to such certainty. She wrapped Josie in a wet blanket and headed for the front door, their only escape. Outside, chaos reigned. 2 of Griggs's men lay motionless in the yard. Another fired blindly into the darkness where Silas had been positioned. Of Griggs himself there was no sign. A hand seized Clara's arm. She whirled, revolver raised, to find Marshal Crow, blood streaming from a cut on his forehead. This way, he urged, pulling them toward the barn. Miller helped me escape. Griggs's frame job fell apart when the land office clerk confessed to being bribed. Silas is out there, Clara protested. Your brother can handle himself, Crow replied. The child needs protection first. They reached the barn as flames fully engulfed the cabin. Crow positioned Clara and Josie behind hay bales, then took up a position by the door with his pistol ready. A shot rang out and Crow grunted in pain, blood blossoming on his right arm. He switched his pistol to his left hand as Jedediah Griggs stepped into the barn doorway. "Should have taken the money, Mrs. Whitlock," Griggs said, his rifle trained on Crow. "Now I'll have the land anyway once you're all properly deceased in this tragic fire." "Shoot him, Marshal," Clara urged. Crow's left-handed shot went wide. Griggs laughed, aiming more carefully. "Some outlaw you turned out to be, Crow. Can't even shoot straight when it matters." The rifle's report was deafening in the enclosed space. Crow staggered back, falling to one knee, but Griggs jerked oddly, a look of confusion crossing his face before he toppled forward. Behind him stood Sela's Spencer rifle smoking. "I can shoot straight just fine," he said to Griggs's prone form. As they dragged the wounded marshal from the burning barn, Clara looked back at her homestead. The cabin was now fully engulfed, years of work and memories vanishing in the hungry flames. Yet Josie was safe in her arms, and both Sela's and Crow had survived. Griggs had failed, but at terrible cost. Morning revealed the full extent of the destruction. The cabin stood in ruins, the barn badly damaged. 4 of Griggs's men lay dead, with 2 others captured by townsfolk who'd seen the flames and come to investigate. Griggs himself had survived Sela's shot, though the physician doubted he would ever walk again. As Clara surveyed the wreckage of her home, Marshal Crow limped to her side, his arm bandaged. "It's still your land," he said softly. "And Griggs will face justice for what happened here." "Justice won't rebuild my home," Clara replied bitterly. "No," Crow agreed, "but neighbors might." He nodded toward the road where wagons were appearing, carrying lumber, tools, and supplies. Leading them was Deputy Miller and the Peterson family, who had refused Griggs just as Clara had. "Word spread about the attack," Crow explained. "And about your stand against Griggs. Seems you're not as alone as you thought." Rebuilding began slowly, with neighbors Clara barely knew arriving to help clear debris and raise new walls. The Peterson family offered their spare room until the cabin could be reconstructed. Clara initially refused, proud even in devastation, but Josie's needs outweighed her pride. They moved in temporarily while Sela's camped at the homestead, guarding what remained. The trial of Jedediah Griggs became the talk of the territory. Confined to a wheelchair by Sela's bullet, the once imposing cattle baron looked diminished in the makeshift courtroom. His remaining men, facing charges themselves, turned on their employer in exchange for leniency. Clara testified about the threats, the burning barn, the final attack. When she finished speaking, several jurors nodded in grim understanding. "Never seen a territory jury convict a rich man before," Sela's remarked as they left the courthouse. "Times change," Marshal Crow replied, his wounded arm still in a sling. Hard to ignore attempted murder and arson witnessed by half the town. The verdict came swiftly, guilty on all counts. Griggs would spend what remained of his life in territorial prison. His assets were seized, with restitution ordered for Clara and the other farmers he had terrorized. "Justice served after a fashion," Crow said when he delivered news of the judgment to Clara at the construction site that had once been her home. She looked up from the garden she was replanting, soil dark beneath her fingernails. "Justice would have Thomas alive, Marshal." "Elias," he corrected gently. "After all we've been through, Mrs. Whitlock, formality seems unnecessary." Clara brushed dirt from her hands. Clara, then, a fragile understanding grew between them in the weeks that followed. Crow visited often, ostensibly to check on the rebuilding progress. He brought toys for Josie and books for Clara, carefully selected volumes of poetry and frontier guides that revealed thoughtfulness beneath his stern exterior. Sela's watched these developments with guarded skepticism. One evening, as he and Clara sat on the half-finished porch, he finally spoke his mind. "Man courting you has shadows in his past, Clara." "As do we all," she replied. "You most of all, brother." Sela's cleaned his rifle, a nightly ritual regardless of whether it had been fired. "Difference is I don't hide what I am. Marshall carries secrets like ammunition, saved for when they're needed." "And you think I can't handle secrets?" Clara challenged. "After everything that's happened," Sela's considered this. "Not saying that, just saying be careful where you place your trust." A week later, with the cabin's walls standing but the roof still incomplete, Crow arrived with unexpected news. "Territorial governors confirmed your land claim," he announced, handing Clara an official document. "This property is legally yours with all mineral and water rights. No one can contest it now." Clara traced the embossed seal, remembering how Thomas had dreamed of this moment. Thank you for your help, Elias. That night, beneath the stars visible through the open rafters, Clara found herself telling Crow about her life before Wyoming. About growing up in Ohio with Silas, their parents' early deaths, her marriage to Thomas, and their journey west seeking a new beginning. What about you? She asked. You know my history, yet yours remains a mystery. Crow was silent a long moment. I rode with the James gang for 2 years after the war, he finally said. Not robbing, mostly scouting, but I wore the outlaw brand all the same. Clara waited, sensing there was more. A bank robbery in Missouri went wrong. Women and children died. His voice tightened. I wasn't there that day, but the guilt lives with me. After that, I drifted west, changed my name, tried to outrun what I'd been part of. How did you become a marshal? Previous lawman was killed in a bar fight. Town needed someone with a steady gun hand and the will to use it. Nobody asked too many questions about my past. Crow looked into the darkness. Thought maybe wearing a badge would balance the scales somehow. Has it? Clara asked softly. Not yet, Crow admitted. But helping you against Griggs felt like a step in the right direction. Their conversation was interrupted by Silas's approach. The brothers-in-law regarded each other warily, an unspoken tension between the soldier and the reformed outlaw. Griggs's remaining men left the territory, Silas reported, spotted them riding south this morning. Good riddance, Crow said. Silas nodded once, then turned to Clara. Cabin needs finishing before the first snow. Arrival of autumn brought cool nights and golden aspen leaves. The cabin was completed just as the first frost silvered the grass. Clara baked bread in the new stone oven, filling the home with fragrant warmth that reminded her of happier times. Silas, who had been sleeping in the rebuilt barn, announced his intention to establish his own homestead on neighboring land. Need my own place, he explained, but close enough to watch over you and Josie. Clara recognized the peace slowly growing in her brother. His nightmares came less frequently, and occasionally she even caught him smiling as he carved wooden animals for Josie. The land was healing him just as it was healing her. With winter approaching, Marshal Crow visited with increasing regularity. On a clear November afternoon, he arrived with his saddle bags fuller than usual. Brought something, he said, presenting Clara with a small package. Not much, but I thought you might like it. Inside was a silver frame holding a sketch of Clara's cabin, rendered with surprising skill. Did you draw this? She asked, admiring the detail. Had plenty of time to practice during long nights watching over dusty towns, Crow admitted. Wanted you to have something beautiful for your new home. Clara placed the drawing on the mantel next to Thomas's pocket watch, the only personal item salvaged from the fire. Thank you, Elias. That evening, as they sat by the fire, Crow asked permission to properly court her. I know it's soon after Thomas, he said, and I know you have Josie to consider, but I've grown to care for you both more than I thought possible. Clara studied his face, seeing honesty in his eyes. Thomas would want Josie to have a father, she said carefully, and me to have a partner, but courtship must be slow, Elias. We've all endured too much change too quickly. I can be patient, Crow promised. We have time now. The first heavy snow came in early December, transforming the homestead into a white wonderland that delighted Josie. On Christmas morning, Silas arrived bearing gifts he'd carved himself, a rocking horse for Josie and an intricately detailed jewelry box for Clara, something to replace what was lost, he explained gruffly. Clara embraced her brother, feeling the tension that had always held him rigid begin to soften. Will you stay for dinner? Elias is coming as well. Silas hesitated only briefly before nodding. Suppose I could manage that. The meal passed with surprising ease, conversation flowing more naturally than Clara had dared hope. Silas and Crow found common ground in hunting stories, while Josie entertained them with carols learned from Mrs. Peterson. Later, watching Josie play with her new horse before the fire, Clara felt something she'd thought lost forever in the flames that took her first home: contentment. Not happiness, not yet, but its quiet precursor. Spring arrived with a rush of green that transformed the scorched earth around the cabin. Wildflowers pushed through soil enriched by ash, and the vegetable garden Clara planted flourished in the Wyoming sunshine. Josie grew too, losing her baby roundness as she raced about the property, often accompanied by the careful watch of either Silas or Crow. On a perfect May morning, Clara stood on her porch, watching her daughter chase butterflies through new grass. Crow rode up the path, dismounting to stand beside her. Without a word, he took her hand, his calloused palm warm against hers. In the distance, Silas worked on his own cabin, the steady rhythm of his hammer marking progress toward his new beginning. He waved once, acknowledging their presence without intruding on their moment. Your land is beautiful in the spring, Crow observed. Our land, Clara corrected softly. If you're still interested in that proposal. Crow's smile rivaled the sunrise. More than ever, Josie's laughter floated on the breeze as she discovered a new flower, her delight uncomplicated by memories of fire and fear. Clara watched her daughter, thinking of Thomas and the dreams they'd shared. He would approve, she believed, of this new chapter they were writing. The homestead stood restored, stronger than before, much like the family it sheltered. The battles had been fought and won. Now it was time to live.